This is That One Audition with Alyshia Ochse.
Okay, Asher, I have to be totally transparent, and I'm going to do this on mic. I am late to the Ghost game. I have some friends on Ghosts. This is really good. This is Devin is a lot like an old friend. Devin and I did like web series together 15 years ago. And then when Devin got this, God. I was like, oh, cool. Fun little show. Like we're all working, whatever. I was up all night last night because I was like, this is actually really good and really funny and great. So I get so excited when I finally get to explore great new television out there because there's so much, but sometimes things get lost. So I just wanted to start there. Like, what a great character. Way to go. Way to score.
Thank you.
Trevor terms, way to score.
Way to score. That's a very on brand for Trevor. Yeah, I think it is a very unique show with a very special premise that I've been auditioning for pilots for 2+ decades, halfway through a third. And I had never come across anything like this. I love that, Devin, I'm now craving to see those web series. I would love it. So please, if you have them, send them to me.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to imagine because I've spent time now. I'm a big football guy and I've spent time with professional football players. So the transition of Devin from college football Hall of Fame to NFL player to actor, I would love to see the earlier iterations of that transformation in action.
I'm pretty sure some of that's online. So we'll off mic, I'll tell you where to find that.
Amazing.
So I'm so curious. So you went to Columbia, you got your MFA as well, and up north. So the acting, was that always the plan, or was filmmaking? Because you've got directing under your belt, you got writing under your belt, like you're doing kind of all things, were all lanes wanting to go at the same time?
Well, this is a podcast about auditions and the chaos that surrounds them. So let's just say that no plan can be planned on. But yeah, I knew I wanted to be an actor. The reasons for that have changed and developed over the years, some healthy, some not so healthy, but enough to keep me in the game. And then filmmaking came into the equation because I wanted to go. I actually remember I was up for I'd auditioned for a bunch of pilots and stuff like that. And my like junior or senior year of high school, I got selected to test for one. It was a show called Commander in Chief with Gina Davis.
Yeah.
And so they flew me out to LA and I was kind of like, whoa, this was the first time where something that I put out in a room was suddenly like the ball got hit back to me. And I was like, oh, wow. Oh, okay. So this can work. And I went out there and I was basically like, okay, so if I get this, I'm going to do it. But if not, I'm going to go to college because that's, I wanted to. I remember Rod Laurie, who was the creator of it, saying that the guys, as in like male actors, never go to college. The girls always do and the men don't. So maybe that was also a factor. I was like, oh, well, I want to be one who goes. So I didn't get it, long story short. And I applied to Columbia where I kind of always wanted to go and got in. And so that kind of path was set. And then the purpose of, sorry, this is a long-winded answer. At Columbia, there wasn't a big acting program. And I knew coaches, I knew who I wanted to work with in New York. So I wanted to keep working with those people, but take the education as a chance to actually get a liberal arts education. And Columbia, of course, has a massive core curriculum. So it's hard to get out of there without learning something. So I opened myself up to other things, and then film became my major to try to get a broader sense of this whole thing.
Which is so smart. I mean, when I started, if you didn't go to, like, I was convinced not to go to school, which is funny that you say that stat where it's like mostly women go to school. Oh yeah, my parents were not wanting this. They wanted the safety job to be the major versus majoring in something that's not going to serve me when it doesn't work out, right?
Got it.
But I love that like film was the thing, like understanding it all. So what I did is I got to LA and I started becoming a reader at certain places, or I interned at certain places just to understand how does the business actually work? How do people actually audition to get a job? I'm curious who the coaches were that you wanted to work with in New York.
One of them is a guy named Larry Moss, who is brilliant. The other one is a guy who is probably most responsible for me having, Larry is responsible for a lot of my growth as a person. This other person is mostly responsible for my work as an actor and me figuring out how to work. And that's a guy named Bob Krakauer, whose stomach will churn knowing that I'm saying his name in public because he just hates.
He's been mentioned on here before. You're not.
I'm sure he has. Yes. Yeah, I'm sure he has. Bob's just the thing that I was describing about wanting to get a sense of like the overall picture of filmmaking. That's like Bob basically was like, oh, I get it. All the directors are learning Spanish in school and the actors are all learning English and they're all wondering why no one can communicate. So he was like, I'll teach some actors how to speak Spanish. Or I forget where I signed up the languages. But yeah, so learning how to tell stories visually, tell stories in pictures through behavior, that was a real turning point for me. And I wanted to, the second I walked into Bob's class, I was like, oh, this is it. Okay.
Yeah,
I get it now.
So then tell me, what's the storyline then to going from Columbia then to going to get your MFA versus finishing with Columbia and being like, okay, here I am, Law and Order, I'm ready, because you're in New York. Yeah. You got to get your like staple credit, which you did. Well
that's
done.
Right. Thank you very much. My parents wanted me just to go out and work, just like, you're an actor, go be an actor and do it. And I grew up, I'm dyslexic and had a lot of learning issues. And at Columbia, a guy who was a director there, there's another student who was a couple years older than me, was directing a production of Julius Caesar that was going to take place all over campus. It was going to move from like section to section to section. If you've seen the campus is like this very old Greco-Roman style. And he offered me Cassius. And I was terrified and I said no. I was like, I can't do this. This is not going to work. So I just said no. And I felt bad, felt like I really avoided something there. And it was actually a conversation with Larry Moss, a few conversations with Larry Moss of saying, give yourself the time. If you feel like you don't know what you're doing and you want to tackle this stuff and really figure it out, dedicate the time to go study, to go actually study. And so that spawned the idea of going to grad school. And there was a year of like the auditions and all that stuff. In the meanwhile, I went to RADA to try to do some Shakespeare and got my ass handed to me. But I saw what it was like when it was done well. And I wanted to figure that out. So, and grad school was a good thing for me just to get out of New York, to get, into a new setting. I had the 4 years of high school and the 4 years of college, had nightmare auditions and experiences in the business. So getting out and getting a nice clean start, a reset was a good move for me at the time.
Okay. So that's what I'm curious about. After your MFA, and you're West Coast for that, right?
Yeah. ACT in San Francisco.
That's what I thought. So do you have an agent or a manager? Because it sounds like you were working already in high school that stayed with you through all of your training, or post, MFA, you start with a new team, especially if you're wanting to kind of start fresh in this lane of education. Now you've been educated, right?
Now I've been educated. That's right.
Some people want to how do you shake off that reputation where you're kind of planting seeds, teenage years, college years by auditioning and stuff. Now you have even more experience. Is it a challenge to get back into certain casting directors, or?
It's funny. I'm sure I was with 4 or 5 different agents from those 8 years when I was in New York, 9 years, I guess 8 years of auditioning. And I was with a guy named Barry Colker for a long time who worked with kids. And that's when I was doing a lot of pilot auditions and stuff like that when I was in high school. And then I bounced around. I did a play downtown. I promise to answer your question. I did a play downtown that we did twice. We did it at a small theater. I think we did it at a theater for New City, and then we did it at the DR2. And on opening night of both iterations, the agent who I was working with, both of whom who had taken me on off of a recommendation from an acting coach, they both called and fired me.
What?
Yeah, opening night of the one downtown at Theater for New City, an audience, whatever it was. And they called, I won't name names, but called and were like, yeah, we're not interested in this.
Any reasoning other than our time?
I wasn't what they were looking for. They didn't like my work. They didn't like the play. They didn't, whatever it was. And then so that was devastating. But then to remount the play at a bigger theater And then I was with a new agent at the time, or a new manager. I think the second one was a manager. No, sorry, the first one was a manager. The second one was an agent. And I was with a big agent at the time, who's a very established agent. And she called the next day after opening night and was like, yeah, we're not interested anymore. So the same play twice.
Way to get it out early. Everybody gets fired once. Like, or at least
I got two.
Point. You got two.
Yes.
You got it done early. They're kicking themselves now, but great.
So, but so that was a big kick in the teeth and made me feel very small. But what it did do was, when I went to grad school, I had a manager by the time I was heading to grad school who was committed and wanted to work with me and had been working with me. But I any kind of heat or interest I had on me had kind of cooled off. And I think that person would have continued to work with me through grad school, but I wanted a full reset. And so when you do grad school, you do this showcase at the end. Mm-hmm. And I was part of a very talented class at ACT. And for whatever reason, I'm certainly not the most talented person or the most shiny person in my class, but for whatever reason, the scene that I did with my classmate, Latifah Holder, who's also out there working, the scene we did just popped. And people liked it, and we both had lots of offers. And because I had been fired multiple times, I knew what I wasn't looking for.
Will you speak upon that? Because people ask all the time, especially coming out of conservatory or any MFA program, or meeting with a lot of people, they all of a sudden get on something big. Then it's your turn, which actors normally are like, please help me. Can I? May I? Yeah. And then when you're in the driver's seat because of experience, what did you know you didn't want, and what were you looking for in a teammate?
I mean, look, it's not unlike dating in the sense that it costs nothing for an agent or a manager to pick you up, to say, oh yeah, I'll work with you. Why not? It's no skin off their back. But that doesn't mean they're going to do anything. And it doesn't mean, a few months in, a few months of quiet, you get lost in the shuffle. I knew I didn't want to be with a place that was big. I knew I wanted a place that had muscle, but wasn't a big place. And I knew that I wanted people who I was going to want to spend time with, and people who I connected with on a personal level. It's funny. Once I kind of set my team, I moved to LA afterwards. Once I set my team, we did this lunch with two of the agents and the manager. I hired STB Partners as the agency, and then my manager, Joni Burstein.
I'm with Ro and Susie. Yes. I love Joni so much. I know. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love them too. And so we sat down and had lunch, and it suddenly dawned on me that I had hired my mother 3 times.
They will take that as such compliment.
I know.
I've great mothers.
I've told them this. I do. But anyway, so the point of that is to say that this business, it's cutthroat, but it's more than that. It's very impersonal. And I wanted to have I wanted to have people who were invested in me personally, and who I was invested in. There was a relationship. And also, I had seen a side, agencies get people who come in and they build them and then they leave. And that's a heartbreak, and I kind of was able to see that side of that team too, and kind of see their heart a little bit. I don't mean to get all ooey gooey, but there is a sense of when you can kind of see a kind of mirroring back and forth. That's also really important. And the other thing I was doing in these meetings that I think kind of surprised people is I was never going to work with someone who wasn't at the showcase. And so what happened was a lot of people heard that I was taking all these meetings and would want to sit down and have a meeting. And I would take the meeting because who doesn't want to meet someone? But I would usually start by saying, listen, just full disclosure, this is probably not going to work out, because I have been with people who haven't seen my work and have taken me on recommendation. And then they see my work and they're not happy with the situation. So I wanted there to be that whatever the thing. And then I remember even when Joni actually wasn't at the showcase, but I loved her so much. So I just started sending her bad audition tapes. Like I just sent her everything that I was like, I can do this. Like this can be, this can exist too. Are you sure you want this? Are you sure you want this? And she was like, yep, this is all good. I'm on board.
That is a solid move. That is a hilarious move. Like, let me show you my worst. It's like you said with dating. You're like, here's all my baggage. Still want to buy it? You want to buy it? But
Yeah.
that gives you duration. You know, I was actually really happy in doing the research when I looked you up. I was like, oh, that CAA, I'm sure they've come a knocking, or some of the big guys. I can say it. You don't have to. That you decided to stay with a team that has built you to a place that sometimes
Yeah.
people like to abort mission. You know, the big dogs come in because you've done the legwork, right?
Yeah.
Your team has done the legwork with you. You guys have come together to this place that you can have the champagne together too. You know?
And it takes time, because it's not just about the work you do, but also the circumstances in the business and what falls to you. And it's such a numbers game. I mean, that team signed me in 2014. It took me like a year and a half to get my first play. I had just been in grad school for 3 years. It took me a year and a half to get my first play. And then I didn't get my first job on television. I mean, it's post.
Post Law and Order. We're not going to talk about Law and Order.
Post Law and Order.
Everybody needs that credit. But like 2018, you do House of Cards.
That's so all those things, House of Cards, Chicago Med, all those 6 guests or whatever it was that I did, Succession, that all started coming. That wasn't going to be for 3 more years when I actually moved back to New York and hooked up with an agency here in New York called Cornerstone, who I loved. And Cornerstone and STB have a relationship, and so they work with each other and they share me. So it's now the family's even bigger. The family is so much bigger.
Well, I'm so glad that you're talking about that and the time that it takes to like build the house, right? I always like use this analogy that it takes a lot of bricks. The foundation has to be solid in order for you to have a career, which you're having a career now, not a job. And a lot of actors, I think, get into this and like you get excited to have that first job, but how do you sustain it as a career? You got to have a good foundation. I want to talk for a second about The Train, because you do that in 2015. You write, direct, star in. What is the impetus for that, other than, you know, you want to start working and you have this beautiful idea? I'm curious how that comes to be, because then again, like you said, we have another few years before you're starting to like get your foot in the door for some damn good shows.
Yeah, they were great shows. The idea for that happened because it was a man that my dad met and told him his story of surviving the Holocaust. And it was this just like random thing. Like it was this impulse and a stroke of luck. And I was kind of taken by that. And I had this long chat with my dad about it. And so the story came out of that. But that was a long process because it was really the first thing I'd ever directed that, you know, was a legitimate thing. And it was only legit because Eli Wallach played the survivor and wanted to do it. And so suddenly I'm like,
how did you get Eli on board?
I got Eli because years prior, I had worked with a woman named Susan Batson. I was in her class, and one of the other people in the class was a colleague of hers, Roberta Wallach, who's Eli's daughter, who's an amazing actor. And then I hadn't seen her for a few years, and I had done an audition recently that somehow she had seen. I don't remember why or how, but I was driving back from meeting the real guy to see if he would. It's very hard if you're making a short film with someone who's like a character who's 80 plus. Casting that thing is very difficult. There's not a big pool to draw from, and so I was considering having the real man play himself, and it just didn't feel right on either side. And I was driving back, and Roberta called me out of the clear blue and said, "I'd seen this audition you did, and I remember you being a mess, and you're not so much of a mess anymore. I'm good work." She didn't say that, but that was how my mind internalized it. She was calling and being very sweet and saying, "You know, you did really good work with her." You know, and I said, "Roberta, I can't believe you're calling me because I have this thing that I wrote with your father in mind. Because if you write an old Jewish man for a long time, Eli Wallach was like you know, had the market cornered. Could you show it to him?" And initially, I think she said no. I think she was like, "This is not why I called you. We're not doing this." And I don't blame her. And it was just like, "Oh, I'll send it to you." And then I didn't hear anything. And one day I got a phone call, and I got it from a guy who had to put on an accent. Was like, "How does this sound? Does this work for you?" And it was Eli. And he couldn't have been more gracious and generous. He was Marlon Brando's landlord. Like, he had been around forever. You know, he was a legend.
Just having him on set. Yeah. It's not even what's being captured in the camera. It's the insights of what you're getting. I can only imagine.
That was the thing, is he would start telling a story, and then we would just kind of like flow into the thing. And then, you know, it would be like, Eli being Eli telling these stories, and then we'd roll right in action. Let's go. And watching him work was kind of mesmerizing. And then for a long time, he passed not long after that. And then I had a lot of guilt, and I kind of sat on it for a long time because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not good enough to do this. And it took me a long time to come to the realization of exactly what you just said, which is he spent the whole time on set telling stories. Mm-hmm. So he gave us 2 days of his time telling stories. He would probably want this story to be seen. So I dedicated it to him, and we got it out there, and it had this wonderful festival run.
It had a beautiful festival run. So many people gave such great recognition for the efforts that you all pulled together. And I love that all of that came, honestly, from an audition. You never know who's seen your auditions. And I always say on here, too, the seeds that you plant today in an audition, you have no idea where it's going to come full circle or who's going to see it or what's going to happen. That is your job.
That's very funny. I actually hadn't even clocked that in my head that did happen technically because of an audition. Yeah. Because for a long time I was like, I just couldn't get a job through auditioning. I was like, I have a chance at anything if you can see me act, if you could do it. But if you ask me to audition, you just shot me in the foot. Like, there's just no way. But you're right. That it is essentially about taking that risk and putting stuff out there. And the second I started working is when I started studying auditions.
Let's talk.
I wanted to get good at that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad this flowed so nicely. So if I'm looking at your resume, right, as somebody who's starting out there and getting his feet wet in auditions, you've got a beautiful resume of knowledge of what acting is, right? You went and you armed yourself. But then transitioning that type of muscle into an audition, it's totally different. It's a totally different process. The audition versus being on set, the audition versus being on stage, the audition versus it's completely different. So, but to do House of Cards, Succession, even the Chicago, that's such a specific type. You got your procedure, you know what you need to hit in that audition. Before we get to Ghost, I want to know what had to click for you, or what audition finally allowed you to start working the audition process.
Well, first of all, there was so much shame and anger at myself because I had had a lot of opportunities over the years, and I just couldn't. I would walk into an audition and black out. Like, I would just dissociate. I just wouldn't be there, and I go on this autopilot where nothing special was happening, and I could feel, and no matter how hard I tried, that's what would happen. And so I remember, and a lot of it was, because of Bob and getting back into his work, and really the ACT was great, taught me a lot of things, but that it didn't it didn't solve the problem I was trying to solve until I was back with the guy I wanted to work with. And, or at least with that technique that I wanted. And I remember the thing that really, there was an audition for Goliath. There was a show a while back that was it was long and it was very technical. And I had choreographed and boxed that thing in and figured out every single moment of it. I was just running it. And it was the first time that the old habits had been replaced by the new habits, and things were starting to kind of shift over. And I didn't get it, but I think part of me not getting it was that the role, I think, never existed. I don't think it ever happened. But I was like, okay, now I just grabbed something. There was something in the room. I was in that room, and I could see things and I could hear things, and I was present and I was responding like I'd gotten something. And then the thing that I was honing in on was that there's this clip of Phil Hoffman talking about acting. He's doing Press for the Savages, and I would always show it to my students. And he's basically like, life is chaos, right? Everything around us is chaos, and we're doing everything we can to
manage it,
control that, manage it. Yeah. But in acting, there's a script. So the control is already baked in. We have to kind of provide the chaos. And so what I think is unique about auditions is that there actually are so few guardrails. Whereas on set, you got to hit a mark, there's a light, you got to catch this thing, you got to make sure you don't step on someone's line, you got to make sure you don't block their light. There's so much going on. In audition, it's just you in front of a camera. And it's up to you to actually have a conversation with that reader that is different than whatever you planned at home. If you can pull on some of the stuff you planned at home, great. But if you can walk in there and surprise yourself and actually let something spontaneous happen in the moment while people are watching, and it's like, screw them. Don't even worry that they're there. It's the most important person in that whole room for you is the reader.
Yes.
And as I'm sure you've experienced as a reader, I'm sure you also have the experience where you're there having a conversation with someone and they're not talking to you.
The TV and film landscape, it's constantly changing, but traditional actor training has largely remained the same.
It's focused on a theater model whose main goal is to help you stretch the expression of your instrument. That's why you can have years of training,
From scene study classes to audition classes.
to even an MFA, and still not be able to book a 2-line co-star.
That's why we created The Bridge for Actors.
A collection of tech, craft, and business online courses to teach you the skills that you need to go from a student of acting
To a working actor.
They're not talking to you. Or as the actor going in, just the same experience of like blacking out versus being in the room and taking everything in and regulating my nervous system to be surprised to discover something. Like that's what I'm curious what your new instincts or new habits were that changed if you're able to speak upon them. Because for me, I started sense memory became really big for me. So anytime I walked into an audition room, and now I do it when I tape, is I'm setting up my space. I would look around in the space and create the world, right? Whereas old Alyshia and her practices would go in and be like, oh my God, I have this audition, and you know, and then you're like, and I'm no longer in my body. But if I could walk in and be like, oh, the reader's eyes are brown. Oh, how beautiful. I'm touching the ground. This is where my kitchen would be. Now I'm like, I'm playing, and then I could discover something, right? I'm allowing my nervous system to calm down so I can be there. Just because you teach and you've had some of the great teachers, if you're able to tangibly say, like, what were some of the new habits that helped you to be in place of discovery, in a place of enjoying the chaos after knowing how to plan, right? Here's the turn. I know I need to be able to execute this or what, and now throw away the pages. Let me be here.
Yeah, I think something, you know, and this is the thing, everybody wants to tell you how to do an audition. Like, oh, make this move here, look over here, do this thing. It's what everyone wants to do. And I've just never seen that work. The only thing that I have seen work, and this is what I would start doing for me and where people I was helping and stuff, is that, okay, something happens here, like there's a change in the script here, you have to do something. Doesn't matter what it is, you have to do something. Something has to change here. And so basically what I figured out was the kind of calibration between chaos and structure, right? What are the very few things that you have to actually hold on to? And when you can focus those things in, you can let go of everything else. And the thing that I tell my students, and I'm fairly certain this is the same thing that Bob would say, is story, relationship, and listening are the only 3 things that are always true. Anything else is a 4th and 2 at the 20-yard line. Like, it's situational stuff. Those 3 are every down. And so once you can say, okay, that's my job, the rest is letting it go. And there's a little bit of, I love that you're like, I'm gonna get in the space, and you're kind of using this, I would say, like, very holistic way of getting in. I think for me, there was a little bit of I don't know what the rating is on this podcast, but a little bit of like a fuck it.
Yeah.
Like almost like rebelling against my nervous system or the idea of this audition. It was almost like a little thing of like, oh, hi, important people. Hi, hello. Hey, reader, what's your name? Oh, yeah. How's your day going? You good? Yeah. Fuck these people. Let's play. You and me, let's play. And from that, I could kind of stand outside of my own mishigas and be in this thing. And then things got so thrilling. And then it felt like, I honestly don't really care if I get this job or not. I felt like I just like jaws just dropped in that room, because my jaw dropped too, because I just did something that was brand new. It doesn't mean there's not a choice. It doesn't mean there's not creative choice. There is creative choice. It's just that creative choice operates more on instinct and you kind of trust the preparation and then throw it away and allow something new to happen, your homework can reveal itself in the room as opposed to you showing your homework in the room.
I love that. Amen. Thank you for saying that. I don't need to see your homework. I'd like to see what you just like. I want to see you get surprised by your homework. Like, whoa, didn't expect this to come up in this moment, or what, like I always say too, when I'm teaching, it's like when the actor drops their line or they're so in it, right? That what they've planned, their bodies are like, wait, we planned something else. We forgot what was happening. That's when we all lean in, right? And I'm like, don't break right there. Stay with me. I don't care what you like, because that's where the magic happens. It's in the mistakes. It's in the chaos. It's in the, what was I doing? What was I saying?
Yes.
That's the magic. Okay, so
and that's why we watch these shows, is to figure out what's going to happen next. So if you're letting us see a script that we've seen hundreds of times and making us wonder what's going to happen next, I mean, you may not get the job, but they're going to remember you.
That's so true.
And then what happens is and this is what I started to figure out, and this is, I think, where Trevor lived a little bit, is I discovered that when I was showing up and having fun and approaching things in an innocent way, people would see a kind of enjoyable, whatever adjective you want to use. People would say douche, or would say clown, or would say whatever. There was this essence that they were seeing that I wasn't necessarily playing, but they were seeing it. And so that's a little bit of like old school clowning, of figuring out, okay, if I do this, if I play this truth for me, they experience a kind of truth in them, and then understanding that kind of the flavor of that.
Yes, because that's what I wanted to ask, is whether or not you were intentionally, you kind of start in a drama lane, or dramas are picky. Succession, House of Cards.
Mm-hmm.
So we all know how you get a pilot. It's quite vanilla sometimes. I know with Ghosts, we've got, the UK version out there. So you have something to at least kind of go for a tonal base point, right? To go and check that out. But still, it is a pilot. I was so curious what your sides were even for the pilot. And it's an ensemble and it's a comedy, right? So your wheelhouse in drama is getting stoked, AKA by the great bookings. I would love to hear your whole process through that, because it was pre-pandemic, right? So you were still going in the room?
Yeah. I had a really...
was it Liz Barnes or Liz Dean?
I actually never met Liz Barnes until I was at the table read, but I know that she was involved in a lot of it. I auditioned for Eric Goldberg and Rosalie Joseph at CBS. And Rosalie had seen me since I was like 14. Like she knew me. And Eric Goldberg... Yes, you watched me grow up. And Eric Goldberg, who's amazing, is at CBS as well and was running it for a little bit. And we've had some mutual friends. I've known him since I was in college. I just hadn't seen him in a long time. But so it was the Tara Reid birthday party monologue. And it was the bit about him moving the cup in the pilot.
Yes.
That little
that
scene.
Vase. Yeah.
The vase, yeah. No, not the vase. It was the earlier one, like, Trevor, show us your power thing. Or you got to do your amazing thing, that thing. And I remember reading it and reading that line, that opening line of, it was the summer of '98. My Lehman Brothers boys and I scooped a copter to beat the traffic out to the Hamptons, because that's how we roll. And I was like, oh, they know exactly who this guy is. I know who this guy is. I went to college with this guy. Like, I know this. This is so smart. This is so good. I have to get out of the way, because this thing is going to work. The only thing that because I'd never done a comedy before, I had a brilliant physical theater comedy teacher in grad school named Stephen Bisher. And I had figured out a little bit of my own thing of this kind of like innocent puppy stinker thing. And I knew I wanted that to play, but I just kind of let that come into the soup a little bit, because the guy just needed a heart too. But that most of that experience was just kind of letting the scene work and being in the thing. It wasn't like, let me set up this joke, let me make sure I hit this punchline. It was much more about the relationships and the dynamics in the scene.
Yeah, and then that way, because it's kind of an easy audition, I would say, as opposed to some of the other auditions that you have. And if you kind of put too much on it, it's just too much, but sometimes the simpler auditions for our instruments, right? It was a simple audition for you because you knew this person. You'd experienced this person. So not
It's
to
simple.
give it too
It's simple
much.
in the yeah. It's simple in the like, okay, I don't have to create a whole thing here, but it's not simple in the sense that, oh, I can really see it and I want it. And it takes a light touch to make this thing work. So like, it's a very easy audition to ruin.
Yes, thank you for rewording it. That's a really great way of putting it. Yes.
Yeah. And it's funny because they have told me, since apparently I was the first person who ever auditioned for Trevor, and our director has showed me his notes, and next to my name is, oh, he's great. He'll never get it.
No way.
Because I was the first, and the first apparently never gets it. Like, you set a line and then everyone beats up on you and surpasses you. But what they had written was so specific. I was like, I can play this guy. I know what the point of view is here. And because they're so specific, I can just focus on the relationships and let that be spontaneous and alive, instead of structurally trying to hit these jokes. Because a lot of what would happen when you go in an audition for pilots is people will push you to try to hit the jokes.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not really, in the long run, your job.
A pilot, a television show is all relationships. We're going to come back for that. So that's the primary thing. I have to circle back to this for him saying he's great. He's never going to get it. So walk me through you going in the first time versus them seeing, I'm sure 100 other guys for this role. How do they circle back to you? What's the process here?
Well, that is actually a question for Joe Port, Joe Wiseman, and Trent O'Donnell. First two are brilliant showrunners. The last one's our director, who told me. But the experience, I can just give you from my side. I went in, I auditioned. I think maybe 2 weeks went by. I was auditioning for a guest star on Blue Bloods at the time that I really wanted, because I didn't think this was ever going to happen. Mm-hmm. And there was a call for I heard that they wanted to test me, and then they didn't have anyone else to test me against. And this actually was a theme with a lot of the ghosts, where they found us and then they couldn't find anyone else. And we all had to wait until they found someone else to test us against. And then we all went through. But I think the funnier, not to sidestep your question, but the thing that has always really sit with me about this experience is, there was one office that I went into when I was early in college, late in high school around, where I was told, the casting officer, I was told, don't ever come back here. And I won't name.
Did they?
They didn't like my work.
Okay.
They didn't like what I was doing. I wasn't working with the most helpful teachers at the time for me, so I will say that. But I was told, please don't ever come back here again. I wasn't doing anything crazy. I was just like, I think probably moving a little slow for people. But that office I hadn't seen since then. And that office was casting another pilot. And it was a pilot that I auditioned for immediately before Ghosts. In fact, they were running so far behind that I was, I think, an hour and a half late for my Ghosts audition. And I was auditioning for it. And that was, all my nerves were in that, because I was like, I have to get this monkey off my back. I have to change their minds about this thing. And it was a role that could develop into a bigger role, but it was a smaller role. And I wasn't right for it, but that wasn't the point. And I went in, and the person who was casting it, whose name I'm not going to say, It was like, oh, wow, you've grown a lot. So at that point, I had got this big monkey off my back, chip off my shoulder. And when I got to the Ghost audition an hour and a half late, there was only one other person in that room. And it was Josh Malina from The West Wing, which is my favorite show. So there's a bunch of little like kismety, things here. And I don't know who Josh was auditioning for, but there was something a little magical about that day.
I would say so. I mean, they usually, retrospectively speaking, whenever I get to do these interviews, it's nice to watch people connect the dots afterwards on that day, in that moment. I can only imagine how your nervous system felt being an hour and a half late to get to go to this other one. This one, you're not putting as much pressure on. You've got all there. You get to go in, discover, have fun, exit. then we hit COVID. I'm sure none of you thought that this show, I mean, we've got the success of the UK one, so I'm sure they thought, okay, this will be interesting to see how this one lands.
Maybe, but I don't know. I don't think this was ever a sure. There were other shows that were in the mix for that pilot season that were, I mean, Patrick Dempsey was returning to television. They were bringing
so many great shows with, let's say, celebrity actors, right? This is such a great show with an outstanding, beautiful talent that a lot of people didn't know, which is why I think the show actually works its best and its magic is because we can't project. Imagine if Patrick Dempsey was playing your role, we're going to the whole time be in that realm.
This is what I tell Rose McIver all the time. No one knows you. That's what I always say.
Right? So it's kind of great. I mean, you guys, I'm going to ask one more question because Please. I think as an actor, you know, you get this muscle going, you start to understand the craft in the building, you start getting jobs that turn into careers. Now you're on an ensemble show. There's 10 of you, right? 10 series regulars?
Mm-hmm.
What has been your learning curve for managing your character and managing an ensemble, a skill set that usually you can only learn while being on set that will serve their jobs? You know, like it's such an acquired thing when you're on with even 6 other series regulars.
Yeah, it is. It's a big learning curve. I'm lucky. I've been working with Bob Krakauer for a long time, and a lot of these lessons he had laid the groundwork for and had taught me, like, you know, this is what's coming your way. Be ready for this. But yes, fundamentally one of the bigger things is figuring out how do you go from a room being all yours in an audition to really being, as you're saying, in that ensemble comedy, that collaboration. And it's not just with the other actors, it's with the crew, with the writers. And something that I had to figure out, I think we all had to figure out, was how much is 1/10 of this pie? Like, what does that feel like? Because doing a scene with 8 of us in it is very different than a scene with 4 of us in it. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was a time in the first 2 episodes where I was like, all right, I'm going to go big on everything and someone's going to pull me back, because I'd rather learn it sooner than later. I'd rather dive into the deep end, make the mistake, and then get calibrated. And we had Trent O'Donnell there for the first 2 episodes of season 1. And he was great at that, kind of setting that, like, here's the lane, here's how to hit the moments or hit the joke. So yeah, I just kind of risked screwing it up. I wanted to go full throttle and see where the boundaries were.
Yeah, I love that.
But yeah, there is this like, I think so. Yeah. If you're trying to figure out where the line is, you got to toe the line. And then,
well, look at the great shows like Seinfeld and Friends and all these. It took them a couple seasons to actually find their groove. And, you know, nowadays they don't give us as much time because you're nervous, like, oh God, are we going to get canceled? But it does take a couple of episodes at least to kind of see where everybody's landing with their character, what they're figuring out. Even a show I did last year, we had an ensemble of, I think there was 6 of us with 2-3 large reoccurrings. And it took us a couple episodes, and it was a thriller comedy to be like, where are we? Where do we fit till we lock in? And you're like, oh, okay, here we're going. But it does. And I'm glad that you said that to swing at the beginning.
And we got lucky. It's just one last thing. We got really lucky that the people on this show are really great people. Yeah. Because no one gets to be the star of the show. Mm-hmm. So there is a kind of sharing the plate, graciousness, you know, working collaboratively. We got really lucky with this dynamic. And so kind of protecting that cast dynamic has always been paramount to a lot of us, because I think it is in many ways, the writing is great, the concept is great, the crew is amazing, but the fuel of this thing, the chemistry that we have as a group, I think is really important.
It's beautiful. It's really, and I think
Thank you.
I hope that you guys go for years and years and years. And if so, like, enjoy it now. So like when you go to the next series, like you understand like the magic of the family that you've created. Yeah. I have to ask, because you're hilarious. Last thing, did ghosts allow you to parlay your dream? The Jaguar thing is hilarious. This is, I was up late and I just was like, this is genius. I want to know how, if you're able to tell me quickly, conceptually how this came about, and then how you were actually able to go about doing this. What connections did you use to
This
push
is
this
this is
forward.
absolutely my favorite topic to talk about because for someone who's been a fan of this team since I was 8 years old, I've been a fan of this team before I ever knew I wanted to act. So the fact that I get to mix all the things that I love to do. Okay, where this came from was the impetus for the whole thing was the Jaguars wanted to make an NFL scripted joke because there were all these conspiracy theories about it, and the Jaguars have had a rough couple decades and then had a really good season and a season that they earned. That was a really good season, and they wanted to kind of capitalize on it, but they didn't know how to make the joke, and it's by definition a scripted joke. It's a scripted comedy thing. And they reached out probably 2 years ago and I guess see me on Ghost, just seeing the fandom. I was like, is this real? Are you really a Jaguars fan? And I started railing at them for hiring Urban Meyer. And they were like, okay, all right, we get it. You're a fan. And they invited me down and kind of brought me into the family. And so when I had kind of heard rumblings that they wanted to do this, and they were approaching me about it and asking questions like, and do you want to be involved? And I was like, yeah, I do. And I was like, but if you want to do this, I think the way to do it is to do it as like a mockumentary, and do it where you're like bringing people inside. If the NFL is indeed scripted, what else is true? It means there must be a writer's room that is, dictating all this stuff. Our little writer's room right here.
Right. I love it.
And they loved that. And I was very wary because I had just had a relationship with this team. I was like, I don't want to ruin this. What if I make this and it's a mess and then I don't get to hang out anymore? So I was very cautious of stepping on people's toes. And I was suddenly in all these meetings and the people, Everett Sullivan, who's the director of media, and Patrick Kavanaugh, who's the VP of production, were like, can you speak up, please? Can you partake a little more? Come on. And I was like, no, I don't want to overstep. And eventually I was like, well, how about everybody write a script and I'll write one too. And if you like mine, then we'll do it. And that's what we did. And I wrote mine and I liked it. And they were amazing. They gave me carte blanche and over multiple, they helped facilitate getting players on board. I knew some players, was able to reach out to some people, and the more people we got, and the more people who kind of trusted me, the more people wanted to get involved and heard the concept and was like, oh, this is great. I want in. No team has ever done something like this with this many people involved, and this many players and coaches and former players. And, for me, it was a thrill because I get to write, direct, produce, and acting in it helped with the direction because I know these players and I know these personalities so well. If I can be in the scene with them, I can do things that will direct them to bring their natural funny out. And what was amazing is the Jaguars just let me do it. And so we shot it in 2 days. Then I took all the footage and went away and edited it with an editor, Kent Kincannon. And Trent came down too because I was acting in it. Trent from Ghost came down and I was acting in it and written it and directed it. And I was like, I need someone to watch my back. And so Trent came down and kind of facilitated. And so I went away and edited for like 2 weeks with Kent, brought it back to Jacksonville, and we, synced up all the media. And I think we did a few more pickup shots. And then I think we wrapped it like 3 hours before the schedule was released, and then we put it out.
It's great. It's hilarious.
Thank you so much.
What a great combination of all of your skill sets and taking media and turning it. I was like, what a genius creative idea. It's really, even if you're not so much into football, even if you're not so much into the entertainment business, you will find so much humor. It makes it relatable for all people. Well done. I mean, the Jaguars should
Thank you.
They should be. Can we just keep that going? Remember, what was the show called? Was it Hard Knocks or whatever? I grew up
Hard
watching
Knocks,
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great
do the acting version of Hard Knocks.
Exactly.
Yeah,
well done.
That'd be fun. You're right. One of the reasons we brought in Kent, who edited it, is that Kent is not a football guy at all. And he was like, and I was like, this is great. So if things are fun, the only thing that I pushed for is there's an Urban Meyer joke at the beginning of the video about him not getting on the plane with the team. And Kent was like, no one's going to get this. Cut this. This is not funny. And I was like, Kent, trust me. People are going to. And so that was the thing that we kept in. But for the most part, having someone who could help make it relatable to non-football fans, it felt like the right thing. And I think it was the right thing for the Jaguars too, because you want to, expand the fan base.
Well, dude, what a like fun journey you've had thus far, and you're like not even fully like you're just getting started. So
Thank you.
it was such a joy just to hear your process and to watch your work, and I can't wait to see what's next and just you being an overall storyteller and taking in the principle of like story being first. Way to get knowledgeable of that, hit the ground running, and then take that because you're also teaching, right? I read that. Where are you teaching?
I teach at Hunter College. It's been the schedules with our shooting schedule hasn't lined up the last couple of years, but I have every intention of going back. And yes, it's exactly what you're saying, that a lot of actors go to school to learn character, and then they get on set and no one else is talking about character. They're all talking about story.
It's all
so there's a big paradigm shift that happens.
Yeah, it's huge. So I think this was like such a valuable conversation for the community. I'm grateful to have gotten to chat with you. Thank you for sharing all the good wisdoms and nuggets and failures, because we all fail in this, and that's the only way a creative job gets off the ground is because of our failures and then the shininess that comes afterwards. But usually we're only seeing the shininess. So thanks for like being fully transparent about those moments where you're like, and I don't know what I'm doing now. So let me try this or let me try that. Or yeah, it's a great career choice to emulate.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. This is such a cool platform because it makes me want to talk about all the failure. But you're right. I think that's where, we grow. We just got to keep being brave and taking that chance. But I've loved doing this. You're fantastic.
Thanks.
What a great, I don't know, model and stuff to get out there.
Pull back the curtain on what we do. You've been doing this for we're coming up on these, I said 3 decades. I've been doing it for 2 decades. Hot damn, I wish I could have sat down with somebody at the beginning. And it's like, hey, your journey's going to be this. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about farting in audition. Don't worry about almost getting arrested or this happening or getting fired or whatever. Like, it's a career. I love, one of my coaches always says, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah. And early on, everyone was just like, when I started, it was like, you shouldn't do this. It's hard. Do something else. If you can think of something else, do that. And that's not the message you need to hear. What you need to hear is just prepare for the failure. Learn how to fail. Learn how to take these lessons. Because if you're open to them, they can really be lessons. If you're not open to them, they're just going to hurt. Yeah.
We learn the most from our mistakes. So I'm always so grateful when people can come on and share where they've made a mistake or misstepped and where they corrected it. Because that's where we can learn from each other. And then everybody should go watch Ghost, because I'm so sad. I've been sleeping under the set. I'm going to I have a daughter and I was like, oh my God, I can watch this with her. This is hilarious.
Oh yeah. Great.
So great. It's so great. Well done to the whole community.
Thank you.
Where can everybody find you other than being in their living rooms constantly?
Oh, just my name on social media, Instagram, stuff like that. Asher Grodman on that and all the other stuff. And, try to keep creating stuff and hopefully people will like it.
They will. I like what you're putting out. Keep it going.